everyone. In this video I want to talk about something of a vision that I've had, and this really started as I started to contemplate the atheist mindset and how scientism is somewhat approaching and taking root in um, the West, you could say, and so it has something to do with that. And so I would also say to be aware that there are a lot of videos out there that talk about the rapture and talk about um, dreams that are about God's judgment and it's only going to get worse and all that. Um, in fact, what prompted me to do this video is I saw a video made by a gal who had a similar sort of dream, and it was on my suggested feed on what videos to watch. So I decided to watch it, and I watched the whole thing, and it did seem pretty sound to me. And the woman that said that she had the dream seemed to think that she was not going to be present at the judgment of God, namely because she can't go through that. Um, anyways, my that prompted me to talk about this because I went to go back to find that video so that I could link it, so that I could say this is where I'm jumping in here and basically giving my own take on this. Now, I will say first off that my pastor and I have been going over a study book of Revelation. It's called The Preacher's Guide to Revelation. It's by a company called Hands to the Plow. If you go to handstotheplow.com, you can basically search for Preacher's Guides, and then you can download the Revelation Guide, or whatever one you want, really. It's a free to download. Otherwise, you can pay some money to buy the book, and it'll be mailed out to you. Anyways, getting to this vision that I had, and I feel like it's not going to take that long for me to tell it, but it was basically something like this. The idea of scientism is trying to make its foothold in the United States, and there's a certain spirit behind it that is very atheistic, and it hates God, basically. And so the idea was that well, this is sort of in a way an anti-rapture vision because of the nature of it. But anyways, the idea was that I got a number being about 100 years, 150 years, I believe it was. 150 years. In that time, atheism will no longer be a thing. Within 150 years from now, atheism will no longer be even discussed or talked about or even brought up. And I felt like that number was appropriate, as just as you see things falling through, if you follow any kind of science, you'll see that it's getting pushed more and more towards the subjective sciences. And we can see this through things like, I believe it was Dr. Michael Brown recently did a article on um, grammar being racist. Now, that sounds like a crazy thing to say, that grammar is racist, but if you look at how it was suggested, it makes sense, and it makes sense that this is the trend that things are going, that even things like science itself is becoming more subjective. Um, so the idea behind it was that people that are in impoverished areas of the world, or in the country, the U.S., that these places do not learn proper grammar. So then when the people that come from these areas go to college, they don't have a firm foundation of grammar because of, well, what's the word? I think the word would be something like um, Ebonics. I think that's the word for it, where your dictation of speech is based on a certain cultural influence, and because of this, you don't learn grammar in a way that is conductive to, um, for example, where to put a comma. I see this all the time where people do not know how to use commas. Anyways, I'm getting off topic. That's not really the point of this. So the point was anywhere from 100 to 300 years that atheism was no longer going to be really a thing. That there would be a certain understanding that God was going to be a fact, more or less. That people were going to believe in spiritual things, you could say. That there wasn't going to be a outright denial of supernatural things anymore. So that would be one thing. Then secondly, I had in my mind that within 1,000 years, and part of that is that within 1,000 years of today's time, that people will be living very, very differently than the way that we are living today. And the way I pictured people living then was almost more like Old Testament times, where basically people dress differently. They operated differently too. Instead of having a central sort of, I don't want to say government, but like for their country, instead of having like a regular government, it was more like we went back to almost like a tribe mentality. I'm not trying to argue over evolution here or not. I'm not really saying one way or another, although I am agnostic towards that issue, because I don't think the Bible really says, and you can make a case either way, really. So, anyways, because the word yom, the word day, is not to be thought of as literal, but that's getting besides the point. That's not really what I'm here to discuss. What I'm here to discuss is that in this time frame, within 1,000 years, that people live very differently, and it's almost like each community operates more like a cult rather than simply a city or dwelling place. Like, you might almost think of it like how my church functions is we have a very small church, so I have the opportunity to meet with my pastor. However, I feel like in this world, this was the norm. Only people were it was very hard to be a Christian. First of all, in this world, there was not many Christians. There was very, very few, and the ones that were often persecuted in horrific ways because of standing for the truth. And I did feel like at some point in this time, the Bible was in jeopardy, in terms of it being available in its full context. And with that, along with that, there was something to be said about the internet not being a thing anymore either. So at some point in this vision, there was no more internet, there was no more World Wide Web, and things operated much more akin to a tribe mentality, where people wore strange clothing. They wore things like robes and um, almost like Old Testament times. And there was also this conspiring, like everybody was trying to get power, and so there was all these like secret meetings that were going on between people, and they were always vying for power in terms of um, what how can I take down the next guy in order to get ahead. And that was really the sort of idea behind uh, what I thought. And these people live their daily life fairly regularly, but during the night is when people would have these like secret meetings with other people where they would say, how can we plot against this person, how can we plot against that person, that sort of thing. So anyways, this was within 1,000 years time, and there was no internet, there was no but here's the thing is that sometime within that 1,000 years, within 1,000 years, that people would discover um, things like hard drives and things like that, meaning they would find them archaeologically in the world. And so they would have this process of trying to figure out first what it is, and second of all, uh, how it works, and third of all, how to get to play some, like I'm playing a video right now, like how would they get to be able to play a video. And they had to figure all this stuff out, but eventually they did. And this is in some sense how they found the old world. How they found the old world is through the internet and everything that was posted on the internet. I don't know if you guys know this, but everything that is posted on the internet is stored on a hard drive somewhere in the world. It's stored on a hard drive, and that's you. People like to think about it as a cloud, but it's really just a bunch of hard drives that are storing all this information. So one of these cloud storage drives was found, and they started to figure, maybe it was buried or maybe they had to dig it out, or I don't know how it worked exactly, but they had to try and get these things to work. And at first they had no idea what these things were. Like, what is this? What is this hard drive? They didn't know it was called a hard drive. But then eventually they did find out what was on the internet, and they discovered it. And in this sense, they found out a lot about our history, from the internet, what we were like. And so that's why I think in some respects it's wise for us Christians to be mindful about what we post online. And that might sound like a far-fetched idea that I'm bringing to the table, that, well, because this guy has this vision, that means we have to, be careful about what we post online. But I mean, to be safe, I mean, we ought to already be careful about what we post online, but the idea was that people are going to be able to identify who is and what they believe based on the way they chose to use the internet. So they would know, for example, they might figure out somehow, I don't know how they would, but they might figure out somehow that I have a YouTube channel and I talk about the Bible and I talk about theology. And somewhere along that line, that 1,000 years, the Bible was really put into jeopardy, and there was very few people that even had Bibles, and the ones that did were persecuted. So that's basically the vision that I had, and sort of the caution that I have for against rapture theory, in that, you know, going over this book of Revelation, it's definitely, it doesn't say anything in Revelation about being raptured up, which you would think Revelation, if there's going to be a book that talks about the rapture, you would think it would be Revelation, but it's not in Revelation. People get those texts from elsewhere. So that's the video. Thanks for watching, guys. Talk to you later. Bye.